Hi, this is Anthony Lighthall. Thank you for joining me on this podcast entitled From Dreams to Actions, where we talk about business goals, supporting positive energy, and following your dreams. On today's episode, I want to talk about what is your last name. Now, the reason why I titled this episode that title is because I want to talk about who do you actually work for when you work for an employer? Are you working for that employer? Or are you working for your last name and you're at that employer for a reason? Whether it's this is great money, it's helping me to pay down debt, or it's helping me save for to continue on with education in school, or they have great benefits. I'm working here for my kids or my expecting kid. Why are you working at that employer? And that's what I really want to talk about today. Just to go in, I'm just going to start with the introduction with this, where it's safe to assume that we spend a lot of our time at work, whether it's at work or whether it's, nowadays virtual, hybrid, remote. We just spend a lot of our time working. And I'll say this respectfully, especially in the US. Working 40-hour weeks, 80 hours every 2 weeks is usually like the standard. But we all understand that a lot of times we're working 50 hours a week, sometimes 50, 60 hours a week, depending on the demand of your job and of your employer. And so that's why I said, what is your last name? Because I really want to dive into this today and really talk about how you preserve that legacy. Who are you really working for? Because I'm going to say this right now, and I'm also going to say it towards the end when I conclude. Your last name is not the last name of the is not the name of the company that you work for. And I'll say unless you own the company or unless you are that employer or you own that business. But again, your last name a lot of times does not match or is not the same name of the employer you work for. So who are you working for? What is your last name? So as I said, we do spend a lot of time working. And, you have to really make sure that your business and personal don't get too intermingled at work because then that's where burnout happens. That's where anxiety happens. That's where being overwhelmed happens. And you have to make sure you protect that and find a right balance, which I'll talk about a little bit later in this episode. But you really want to make sure that you protect that because I think a lot of people sometimes forget that your employer is a business and they're going to make business decisions. And a lot of those decisions are not going to be favorable towards you in your position. Now, let me say right now, this is not a episode about don't work corporate or 9 to 5 or ban the man. I'm not talking about that because there are some employers that are really good to their employees and really care about the culture. They're really mindful and purposeful when they're bringing in new talent and promoting from within. Kudos to them, and they should be out there promoting or developing content or a master class to teach these other employers how to really treat employees. But what I'm saying is don't get your eyes off the prize. Don't get your eyes off of what you are at that employer to do. And again, like I said, that employer is a business and they're going to make business decisions because you are hired to do a job, not to make friends, not to be part of a family, but you are hired to do a job that you read on a job description and to help that I'll say machine produce or for that business to grow and to make money um, and to compete with or compete with its competitors or even surpass their competitors. So again, that's why you are hired at that employer. One thing I wanted to really touch on was that word family. And I noticed that a lot when I look at real estate LinkedIn or even like when you're researching Glassdoor. And a lot of employers, and I don't know who thought of this or made this up, um, when they say welcome to the family. Um, Susan just started, in the IT department. Here's her bio. Welcome her to ABC Company family. You all are not my family. You're not. The last time I can't even recall the last time my father terminated me or my sister terminated me. And I'm not, again, this is not bashing companies, but there are companies out there that talk, say, welcome to the family, and they make business decisions a year later, 5 years later, 15 years later, after you've given your blood, sweat, and tears, and they're going to terminate their family member. I don't agree with that. I really don't. So, employers that do say, welcome to our family, I understand what you're trying to do with your culture, but really think about those words and really think about probably changing those words, would be my recommendation, my unsolicited advice to you. Because people that do believe in the mission, in in the vision as well, that's a slap in the face to them. You know, when you're saying welcome to our family, and then okay, we're terminating you, or there's a reduction in force, or we're sending our family member to another country because the labor's cheaper. But it's not going to be you going there and getting the job transfer. We're actually eliminating you as our family member and actually going to have some other family members in another country. Hey, employers, I applaud whatever decisions you make. It's a business decision, and you're there to make money, and you're there for a business. But be very conscious of who you're hiring and what you're saying in your narrative when you talk about welcome to our family. Continuing on with this topic, I also wanted to, talk about, as I mentioned, the balance of business and personal, and a few things that I've learned and a few things that I think will definitely help people to avoid the anxiety and being overwhelmed and feeling like they're being overworked is, I would say number one is really look at what your goals are. Like I said, don't forget your last name. Why are you at that employer? What are your goals? That may be a temporary uh, situation for you. Okay, if I don't get promoted in the next 18 months, I might have to start looking. After 2 years, let's say 3 years the most, I'll be here. But this is really a stepping stone to what I'm really trying to do. Because I was hired as a manager, but I really want to be a VP. How am I going to get there? Maybe this employer will help me get there. Maybe this employer is a good employer and really wants to see me grow and advance in my career, and that's what I'm going to, communicate, to my manager or whoever I need to communicate that to. But if not, I have to make my decisions. And just like businesses and companies make different decisions, they always say it's nothing personal, it's business. It's the same thing that you can say to them when you're looking at leaving or looking at continuing to advance in your career. So again, just really think about, why are you working there? I think that will really help with separating the personal and the business. I would also talk about, or mention, excuse me, is setting boundaries. I think that's really huge, where when you have that autonomy, excuse me, that autonomy to choose your, um, not choose your schedule, but that to control your schedule, make sure that um, you protect that schedule as well. I've had times where my schedule is free and I didn't block any time out for anything, just to relax, just to maybe just get my eyes off of a screen, or maybe just take a walk outside and get some air. Some people just want to fill your day up with meetings, or I need to talk to you about this, or everything is urgent, everything is a fire, everything is an emergency, and it really isn't. But they see you're available, and so they're going to take full advantage of that. And hey, you can't knock them for that, because I would probably do the same thing if I saw someone was available and their time or the calendar wasn't blocked out. So, definitely make sure that you set boundaries and you uh, protect that calendar of yours and prioritize. That is very helpful as well, throughout your day. Just really prioritizing, okay, I got 5 people reaching out to me. What's really important? What really needs to get done today before I leave? And what else can I kind of um, uh, continue working on throughout the week, or even delegate if you have direct reports, or maybe you can get help from a colleague. So really looking at those strategies so that you aren't getting buried in work and overwhelmed and overworked because this is your job. It's not your family. Remember that. Um, a couple of other things with that as well is, making sure that stay focused on the task at hand. Remember what you are hired to do and what you're getting paid to do. And I think that can definitely help, with really prioritizing or separating the business versus the personal and understanding why you are at that employer and what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve and accomplish. Okay. Let me switch gears here and provide an example of something. Whenever someone comes up to me and, maybe they're nervous, maybe they're going through a lot at their job, I always ask them this question. Uh, you go to the doctor and the doctor just told you you only have 72 hours to live. You have 3 days to live. After that third day, you are no longer here on earth. I always ask people if you heard that and you told that to your employer, what would they do? Honestly, what would your employer do for you? Again, like I said, some employers are really good out there and they take care of their employees. But some employers out here, they wouldn't care. I wouldn't say they wouldn't care. They wouldn't invest as much as what you would think they would during your last days. I always ask that person would they deliver flowers to your mom or your family. You're from Michigan and you work in California. Are they going to, fly your family out to your funeral if you decide to have it in California? Are they going to uh, have your name on a cubicle for the rest of the life of that business? Or even an office, if you work in an office, are they going to have your name in there and continuously deliver flowers and make sure no one can ever sit uh, in that office and say, hey, Rick was a really great worker, but unfortunately, Rick is no longer with us, and we make sure that no one ever utilizes this office because it's in memory of Rick. A lot of times, no, that's not going to happen. Why? Because that company is a business and they have to continue to grow, they have to continue to make money. Of course, this is a challenging time for employees and also for that employer, I'm sure, but they have to continue on. They can't stop because one person's no longer with them. Just like when you leave a company, they'll be okay. They they figure it out. You were probably a huge asset and you were probably you played a critical role, but if they appreciated you, they would counter offer, they would really try to keep you, or they wouldn't have taken so long to, maybe promote you or get you to that next level. And you know what you're worth and you have to remember what your goals are and work for your last name. So I always ask people that question if someone comes to me for advice in regards to their company and they're just really stressing out on a business that is not their name. I always ask that. You have 3 days to live. What would your employer do for you? And then that should help you to open your eyes to understand, the level of how much your employer really cares about you or really thinks of you as a family member. Let me give an example of this, a true example. And my cousin shared this with me. And of course, I'm going to make sure that company is nameless. But she mentioned to me in regards to an employee. This was a large company, huge company. And a lot of people wouldn't know it, but it's a large company. And um, an employee, unfortunately, committed suicide at that job, at the office. And she told me what happened was this person was working on a report and they stayed late and they finished the report and then they committed suicide. I don't recall how they did it or what, if it was with a handgun or taking poison or pills or whatever. I don't know. But she told me this story and we were having this discussion as what I'm having in this episode. And she mentioned the company provided, support for employees that probably knew this employee. Um, but she said, that week they went in, they cleaned up the office, they got the person in the body bag and did what they had to do. She said within that week, in less than 2 weeks, that position was back open. Hey, we're looking for this director of sales or whatever position it was. And she told me that, and I wasn't surprised. It was an unfortunate situation of how the business just keeps moving, but they have to. They have to continue. They have to make money. And so I share that real life example because some people may hear me and think I'm just, bad mouthing companies and think all companies are the same. No, it's not that. But these things happen. And you've probably been a victim of it. You've probably seen it. And again, I'm just going back to, your last name is not the last name of that employer. And unfortunately, this person that lost their life or took their life, um, the show must go on. And that's how a lot of businesses view that and think of that. So I wanted to just really share that real life example with you because those things definitely happen. And again, suicide, if people stress out, nervous breakdowns, strokes, high blood pressure. People get on medicines and things like that when they just invest so much energy and time into their job. And maybe it's pride thing, or maybe it's they really just believe in that in the business and in the company. But you really have to take care of your health, and I'll talk about that a little bit towards the end as I wrap up the episode here. But you really have to take care of your health as well while you're working. One term or phrase or whatever you want to call it that was circling around. You really don't hear too much about it, but it was called quiet quitting. And if you're not familiar with quiet quitting, it's I don't know who came up with it. I'm going to make the assumption it's probably an employer that came up with it. But quiet quitting is when an employee is honestly doing like doing the bare minimum, but they're doing their job. They're doing what's listed on their job description, the tasks, the duties, the responsibilities, but they're not taking on extra work or, going above and beyond the call of duty. They're doing their job. In quiet quitting, um, I applaud it. I think I'm not going to say here and think it's great, but I understand where it's coming from and why people um, are doing that or were doing that. And it's more about not being appreciated. You've been called into the office or called up on the phone or a quick voice a video conference. Hey Josh, hey, you mind taking over this committee or hey, how's your quarter looking? How are your sales looking? You're doing really good. Hey, let's go ahead and get up to 110%. I know you reached 97% last quarter. Let's go ahead and reach a little higher. I know you can do it. You're doing really good. It's like taking on that extra work when you're doing what you were told to do. You're doing what's listed on that job description. Why are you adding more work? And it's the thing of not just adding more work, but it's adding more work and or responsibilities and no appreciation. No, there's no money or increase in salary getting discussed or a promotion or I'm going to be a manager because I'm doing manager types of responsibilities and duties or any type of benefits or just appreciation dinner. Nothing. A lot of companies do that. They just add and add and add. When they see that you're doing good, they always want you to do better. And the people that are reaching their goals or doing what they're supposed to be doing, it's like they get punished with more work. It makes no sense. So the whole quiet quitting, I wanted to bring this up in the podcast, in this episode specifically, because it's one of those like you have to go back to your goals. Why are you working for this employer? Me adding this extra work, is that helping me get to my VP role? Or are you just keeping me busy because, you know, uh, Jonathan and Christine, they're not too strong in this field, and so I'm taking it on and I'm pretty much doing their work and they're still hired. It's a lot you can unpack with quiet quitting, But those are my viewpoints on that. I just feel overall it's not being appreciated for one, just doing my job and doing the work I was hired to do. But two, you're adding more work and still not appreciating me, or I'm not seeing any how is this reaching my goals? So that's all I want to kind of bring up with quiet quitting on this episode. But again, it's a lot you can unpack with that, and um, I talked to a lot of people on different opinions on that, but just wanted to kind of bring that up as a side note. Um, Let me give an example of this, a real life example. So another person that I know of um, was an associate level. And long story short, the person that they reported to was a VP, and this VP was getting towards their retirement season, I'll say, and they were really looking at, okay, I'm not going to be at this employer that too long. This person, the person I know, let's call this person Cynthia, is I want to start the succession planning. I want to start grooming Cynthia so that she can, really take the reins and continue on as I transition into retirement. So there was discussion back and forth, and Cynthia was telling me about this. And long story short, I think she was working there probably 2 or 3 years, and she, she told me the last straw was that uh, the VP called her in and said, "Hey, I know we've been discussing about my transition, with retirement, but you know what? I've decided I'm gonna stay another 3 years. There, that's just gonna really help me financially during my transition and retirement. I have my grandkids. I really want to, spend some time with them and even help out my kids as well financially if they need it. So I'm gonna stay on an extra 3 years." And Cynthia, quote unquote, protecting her name, Cynthia told me that after her VP told her that, she started applying, for new jobs. And I applaud that because her last name does not match the last name of her VP, nor does it match the last name of the employer she worked for. And, her goal was to move up. Let's say she was an associate level, she wanted to move up to, manager or director, and she had the responsibilities and the know-how to take on that responsibility and to level up with that. And so she took matters into her own hands and told me that she started applying to other employers right after that conversation. And I was like, I applaud you. That's great. You spoke up for yourself, and you made a decision that aligned with the goals that you have set for yourself in your career. And that's the same mindset that everyone who's listening and watching this should have as well. And that's why I wanted to bring that up as um, a real example, going back to quiet quitting, because this person was doing the work and was getting told that there was going to be transition during the succession planning, and it never happened. And so that person decided to look somewhere that could really help her with fulfilling those goals in her career. A couple more things here I wanted to share before I wrap up, going back to creating a balance uh, while working at your employer, again, can really help and really differentiate personal versus business and not intertwine those, because that can really affect you mentally. Um, Again, focusing on your goals, focusing on yourself and also your family and your loved ones. If you're taking care of people, if people are being supported by your income, that's what's your why. What is your why? Why are you working for this employer? Are they helping you reach those goals? Not just goals as in getting promoted or even financially, but goals as in, just fulfillment, just happiness, purpose, which is really big. So really finding that balance and really understanding your why. Another thing is focusing on allocating time for your loved ones, making sure that there's some type of, work-life balance. Making, of course, we're going to have reports or certain goals that we're trying to meet, and staying at the office later, being on the computer longer than expected, but making sure you don't neglect those loved ones who are actually supporting you throughout this journey and throughout this career path that you have set for yourself in order to make sure everyone is comfortable that you are supporting financially. Another thing is, I would say before work or while you're applying for jobs, making sure you ask strategic questions. Uh, Back in the day, it was the days of you applied with us. Here's the job. This is what we expect. Take it or leave it. Nowadays, it's a little bit, it's more mutual. Hey, we want to make sure this is a mutual fit for you and also for us. And you'll hear that a lot when you're interviewing. But make sure you're interviewing that employer as much as they're interviewing you. Make sure you ask some hard hitting questions. Make sure you ask them the questions that align with your goals and make sure you jot those down and evaluate that and really look at, do I really want to work here? Or when you get multiple offers, go back to those answers that you received and really look at what's going to really fulfill your purpose. What is the right move for yourself? Ask questions about the culture, ask questions about expectations, ask questions about, if I were to be hired, let's say your interview's on Thursday, if I were hired on Monday, what's the first thing you would want uh, me to do to alleviate the stress or the pain points that you all are going through. Ask about the time management. Really be very strategic on that. And I'll probably put a podcast episode with questions that you should ask, challenging questions to really make that employer think, during that interview, so that you can really set yourself up for success and for towards your career and meeting those goals. But continuing on here, again with the balance and setting priorities, make again just make sure the job isn't consuming all of your time. I know it can be very demanding, but make sure you have some of that balance there, so that you can spend time with yourself, and also spend time with your loved ones as well. Remember that your job is not your life. It is not your life. It is a job. It's a business. You're there to help it grow. You're there to help it make money. You have a purpose there, but make sure that you also understand your purpose, which is your last name. And never, I'll say this too, I'm just looking at my notes. Never trade money for your time and also for your health. So when they're dangling that carrot, make sure you're not jeopardizing your health and jeopardizing your own personal time, because that can really get affected. And then at the end of the day, the money's not going to mean anything because you're using that money for pharmaceutical reasons, because you're on high blood pressure medicine, or you're on insulin because now you got diabetes because you weren't eating well. It's a whole list of things I can get into in the weeds, but I'm not. But make sure, again, never trade money for your time and for your health. Remember that. Let me share this last example, and this example is about myself. Not going to share the employer, as you know, I don't. Um, I was in a situation where I was working for an employer. Um, Long story short, it was not what was sold and told to me during the interview. And when I started working there, it was very overwhelming, very overwhelming. Um, Supporting so many departments, so many people, so many teams, and I was not expecting that, and it was never told to me or discussed with me during that time. And it got to the point where I honestly had to call EAP. If anyone that doesn't know that, it's Employee Assistance Program. Employee Assistance Program is counseling services. It's a resource service for employees if they need to learn about putting together a will, if they need to look for services for caregivers, if they have an elderly parent at home. I called this EAP hotline to really discuss and try to figure out how I can strategize my work better. What am I doing wrong? I have all this years of experience. I've never gone through this before. And I was really talking with somebody who could really help coach me and help alleviate some of the stress and the pain points I was going through. On top of that, separately, I got a referral for a therapist where I could talk to someone about this situation and really express myself in um, helping to build my confidence back up because this was really beating me down. Long story short, I made the decision to leave that employer because it was really affecting my health, my mental health. It really was. And it honestly wasn't worth the money I was receiving. Yeah, it was a bump in pay from the place I was at previously, but it wasn't worth it. It really wasn't. It wasn't worth my health, and I'm very happy I got out of that situation, and I really expressed, why I was leaving during that exit interview, and hopefully things have changed. But that's an example of what I went through, and that's where I told myself again I would never trade, money for my time and health ever again like that, because that was something I would not want to go through again, and that's why I'm very strategic on asking certain questions during interviews, because it really reflects back on that employer I worked for. Let's go ahead and conclude this here. Um, just to wrap up, again, you do what's best for you. You do what's best for your family. What is your goal? What is your why? Is what you're doing at this employer helping you to reach those goals? You've been there 5 years. What's going on? Are you working your way up? Are they talking about succession planning? Are you the person that they look for, to complete projects? Are they adding more work and not adding more appreciation? Think about that. Again, this business, this company, this employer, it's a business. They're in it to make money. You're hired to help them to grow. There's something about you add, to that growth into making money. It's not your family. You can develop great relationships, camaraderie with people. Hey, there's people I've worked with that were in probably different departments that I consider friends and still talk to people from previous employers to this day. That's fine. I'm not knocking that. But don't think that this employer is your family. Think about how your mother would treat you versus how your employer treats you. Think about how your favorite auntie treats you versus how this employer treats you. Think about that for a second, okay? Um, Again, I told you I was going to say this towards the conclusion, and I said this in the beginning. Your last name does not match the name of the employer that you work for. Continue to work for your last name. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Comment, like, share, subscribe, and always remember to follow your dreams.